laws that it gives and these rules for living. It's really not about that. It's about these imperfect people who just came out of Egypt and they don't really know how to maintain a relationship with a God who is absolutely good and absolutely perfect. And that's what it's about. That's what Leviticus is about. There is a lot of language in Leviticus about clean and unclean. And here's the deal. It can get pretty technical, but I don't want you to think of unclean as sinful. Unclean does not necessarily mean sinful. In the book of Leviticus, God is trying to teach his people what is and what is not appropriate for worship. And when he says that such and such action is unclean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a sin, but it does mean that it is not appropriate for worship with God in the tabernacle. And I'll prove that point in just a minute. The heart of the book of Leviticus is, I think could be said in Leviticus 19 verse 2 says, "Be holy because I, the Lord, your God, am holy." And that's what he's trying to teach them. If you're flipping through the book of Leviticus, chapter 5, 6, and 7, if you look at the bold headings, you'll see things like this: guilt offering, grain offering, burnt offering, fellowship offering, sin offering. And it's describing all of these different ways you can offer an offering. And that's some of what you see in Leviticus. There's different offerings. God is teaching them there's different offerings for the different things you want to show to God. So there's an offering for showing praise. There's an offering for showing thanksgiving, gratitude, gratefulness. There's a certain offering that is acceptable for atoning for sins, for covering and removing sins. And apart from the clean and unclean discussion that we will have, sin is a serious offense to God. And sin always requires an animal sacrifice, a blood sacrifice. Sin can only be overcome with the blood of something. And we know that is true in the New Testament as well. The Old Testament is so important to understanding why we have Jesus and why we need him at all. You have to understand these things in the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus also tells us a lot about their feasts in worship and their holidays, their national holidays. One of the one of the handouts from this week also is paper clipped together, but it's the feasts and the dates and the reasons for the religious feasts that are described in the book of Leviticus. The last page of this handout is kind of a table that will tell you what Jews are still practicing today in those holiday feasts. But those can be found in the book of Leviticus, so that's also very important. Those feasts and religious holidays, they teach us much about what went on in the tabernacle, about the worshiping of God as both a celebration and a quiet reflection of life and the dedication of life. So definitely the book of Leviticus is not a useless book by any means. Okay, one of the main things that the book of Leviticus is known for are what many people would label as stupid rules. Many of the things that are described as either clean or unclean in the book of Leviticus have to do with health. So there are several rules for handling food, disease, and sex. In these physical principles, they were taught spiritual principles. Remember that Israel has chosen to worship God and God alone. From this point forward, they will look different from their surrounding nations. God is the only one that is giving them, the Israelite, these rules. They are not just rules to be rules. They are not just rules to be nitpicky. A lot of people throughout the years have criticized Jews and Christians for believing in the Bible because of these nitpicky rules and these over-exaggerated things, is what they say. And I want to read some of them to you and show you that God never has things that are useless, and that God never has things that are stupid or nitpicky. All of these rules were for a reason and were for the good of Israel. So if you will look at Leviticus 11, for example, you will see that Leviticus 11 is about clean and unclean food. Okay? That's the bold-faced title of that chapter. And it says, of all the animals that live on the land, these are the ones you may eat, and it describes them. And then if you skip down to verse 7, and the pig, though it has a split hoof completely divided, does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you. So we know this. We know Jews don't eat pork. Why? Why was God just being nitpicky and telling them that to eat the pork it is unclean? Some of the people in the class said, well, it's not just about the meat, it's about where the animal lives and what the animal eats. And those are certainly true. I have a commentary that I'm going to read to you. It says, it is now known, now in our intelligent society that knows things, that knows about organisms, it is now known that the pig is the intermediate host for several parasitic organisms, some of which can result in a tapeworm infestation. One of these worms, it gives the name, grows to about 2.5 meters in length and is found in poorly cooked pork. God is not being mean or nitpicky. He is protecting his people whom he loves from infection and from death. Another one of the stupid rules. Turn to Leviticus 13. Leviticus 13, chapter 13, verse 1 says, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when anyone has a swelling or a rash or a bright spot in his skin that may become an infectious skin disease, basically he goes on to say, bring him before the priest. And if it looks like this, then it's probably an infection and it could spread to other people. So keep that person separate. Did God teach them that to be mean or to be nitpicky? God is teaching these people who never went to high school, who never took, Health 101, who don't know about infections and germs and everything. God is teaching his people protection. And he's not saying, if you have an infection, you're unclean because that's sinful. God is helping his people who don't know any better at this point in time to survive. It's a wonderful thing. It is not stupid. One more. Go to Leviticus 15. These are the sex laws. And it talks about not only, why you shouldn't have sex with someone who's not your spouse. Again, God trying to protect them not just from the unhealthy relationship of being unfaithful to your spouse, but of the spread of venereal diseases. They didn't know about them, but they existed. And God is saying that is unclean. It also talks about after you have had relations with your own spouse, you will be unclean until you, until you take a shower. Why? Is that God being mean? No. God is teaching these people about hygiene. Remember, they're in the desert. There's not a whole lot of baths, okay? So God is being loving and is teaching his people through these laws. 15:19 talks about a woman's period and how no one should be in contact with her blood during that time, for obvious reasons that we today know. Blood is infectious. It's dirty. It talks about her not having relations during her period. Again, they're in the desert. Husband and wife can't just hop into the shower after they have relations if she's on her period. And infection can result on both partners if that were to happen. God is not being mean in these laws. He is teaching the people through the only way he knows how. And it is a perfect way to teach them. So I hope you get the point that these laws aren't crazy. They completely make sense if you really look into why God would have taught them that. So again, something that is clean versus something that is unclean doesn't necessarily mean it's, sin or not sin. God is trying to teach his people what is appropriate for worship and what is not, and what is good and what is not. A word about holiness. The book of Leviticus is all about holiness, and all of these rules really are to encourage them towards holiness. The word holiness is mentioned 152 times in Leviticus, more than any other book in the Old Testament or the Bible itself. So it is a noteworthy point. The Levites are talked about a lot in Leviticus. That's where the name Leviticus comes about. Levites, Leviticus. They are the priests from the house of Levi, the tribe of Levi. Moses and Aaron were of that tribe. And the priests of God became dedicated, ordained to be priests in the book of Leviticus. And later, in all the history of Israel, they will be the religious leaders of the people. I'm not going to walk completely through this, but if you read Leviticus chapter 26, I think it shows the immense love that God still has for these people, and it shows the immense patience that he has and will have with them. Leviticus 26 talks about more of that two-sided covenant, that it's no longer, I will bless you. No matter what you do, I will bless you. Now they're in an if-then covenant. If you obey my commands, then I will bless you. So in chapter 26, God starts out, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments, then, he says, I will give you rain, the land will yield its produce, good thing, good thing, good thing, good thing, good thing will happen. Verse 14, he says, if you do not obey me, then he starts with the punishments. I will appoint over you a sudden terror. You shall sow your seed uselessly. Bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing. In verse 18, if after these things you do not obey me, then another list of punishments. Verse 21, if then you still act with hostility towards me, then more punishments. If by this time you are not turned to me, again, more punishments. Verse 27, if in spite of this you do not obey me, another big list of punishments. Verse 40, then. So how many chances has God already given them? So many chances, like 4 or 5 chances, if you still haven't turned to me. If. And then in verse 40 it says, if they confess their iniquity, or if their uncircumcised hearts become humbled, I will remember my covenant. I will remember the land. I will not reject them. I will not destroy them. I will remember them for the covenant from their ancestors. So God, I think, is prophetically showing them by this hypothetical situation. He says, if you still don't follow me, if you still disobey me, if you, and then at the end he says, but if at the end you will confess your sin, and really it says an uncircumcised heart will become humbled, then I will remember my covenant. See, God ends with his mercy and his love, and I think it's prophetic in that. And that's the end of the book of Leviticus. It ends with that. But I want to go back and look very briefly at Leviticus 16.